Thinking back over this last summer, I'm really thankful for considering the circumstances, all that I got to do. I mean, I got to go to Camp Crosswoods, got to do a local mission trip thingy with you guys, some of you, and Great Adventure Days. But another big highlight for me was going to the Boundary Waters twice, that strip of wilderness between Minnesota and Canada. And, getting around there by canoe. My biggest fear, if I have a fear of being in the Boundary Waters, is getting stuck out on a big lake with a lot of wind. And that's actually one of the most dangerous situations, because if you're in the middle of a lake and you're just on a canoe and the waves get really big, that's when things could go drastically wrong. And I think Jesus' disciples had a very similar fear, rightfully so, that we'll see today in a very short passage in our 5-minute devotional. We're in John 6:16 through 21. When evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started to cross the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed out about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Then they were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. So this passage describes where the disciples and then Jesus were as a sea, and we talk about the Sea of Galilee, but we probably more accurately think about it as a big lake. Now, it's not like Great Lakes size big. It's not like Lake Superior or Lake Michigan, but it's a pretty big size for a lake thingy. If you know your Minnesota lakes, it's about the same as Lake Vermilion. And I was talking about the Boundary Waters earlier. The biggest lake, and the one you really don't want to be out in the middle of with a lot of wind in the Boundary Waters, is Lake Saginaw. And so Galilee's like almost 3 times bigger than Saginaw. So it is pretty large, and you wouldn't want to be out there in a big wind if you're only in a boat that you're just paddling or oaring or rowing or whatever you're doing. So we see that Jesus had stayed behind to pray. John doesn't say that, but the other gospel writers say what he was doing. And his disciples were crossing, and a wind came up. They were crossing the lake, and a wind came up. And then Jesus came to them walking on the sea. And they were afraid, because, it's not something you usually expect. And he says, it's me, don't be afraid. So here we have another miraculous thing. And, the thing about Jesus' miracles that we see here and we see in the Gospels, he doesn't tend to do stuff just to do it, just to have a miracle for the sake of it or for himself usually. It's usually either to help somebody, like we saw him feed people last time, or he's healed people already, or helped with when they run out of catering service at a wedding, ran out of wine. So a lot of times it's to help people, and if it's not to help people, it's usually to teach something. So why was he walking on the water here? I kind of think that maybe it wasn't just because he's like, oh, well, I don't want to walk around the lake. I'm just kind of lazy. I'll walk across it. I really don't think so. I think he was trying to show his disciples and maybe some of the other people something. So what could that possibly be? Well, on Wednesday nights, we've been talking a lot about anxiety, and we've been talking about actually passages like this where disciples are in boats. And the thing that we've been getting out of there is that Jesus, he sees our difficulties, and he comes to us in our difficulties, and he gets into our boat. He enters into our situations with us. And I think that's a big thing that Jesus could be showing his disciples here is like, hey, I see you. I see you're having trouble. I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to enter into your situation with you. That's a very Jesus thing to do. And there's another thing, though, that he could be trying to signal here. Right at the end of the last section, in verse 14, after he'd fed 5,000 people, some of them say, whoa, this is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world. So what is this, the prophet thing? Well, way back in Deuteronomy chapter 15, Moses says, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from among your brothers. It is to him you shall listen." That's a messianic prophecy. That's about the Messiah. And so people have been looking for who's someone who's like Moses that we should be listening to, that we should be looking out for. And Jesus already gave them a bunch of food. Oh, Moses, with the manna in the desert, if you remember anything about that. And now we're seeing someone go from one body of water miraculously to the other side in a way that you wouldn't normally be able to do, like crossing a sea. Now, in Moses' time, it was from the sea parting. Jesus just walks right on top. But he is sort of doing a Moses-like thing there, saying, maybe this guy is the prophet that Moses was talking about. And we'll see more about that next time.